Right, what's going on? What's going on? So we at Bomba, 165th Street in the Grand Concourse at the Andrew Vinales House, and I run into two dudes that I went to high school with. Pulling up, they brought their little sister with them. I'll let them introduce themselves, but it was just dope to reconnect with them and see what they got going on in their lives. And I think what we were talking about off camera about the anthropology connects directly into what we witnessed today. So I definitely want to build on that. But first, introduce yourselves, tell them who you are.
Hi, my name is Chris. Hi, my name is Andrew.
Hi, I'm Terry.
It was fun. I had a really good time. I haven't danced Bomba in a couple of months, so it was good to see this kind of environment and this kind of workshop happening here, and especially in this space. It's a really nice space, and I'm glad that we're utilizing it, and it's very community-based kind of a thing, and I really enjoy that. I had a good time. I liked the dancing. People looked like they were into it. You felt it in your bones, that kind of. It was really nice. Yeah. So I've been working with Dr. Drum, Jose, and Bomba for a couple of years now. I'm being part of the Bomba community here in New York for a couple of years, and it's always amazing to see how folks are like enjoying it, embracing it. Even if they don't know anything about Bomba, they feel it. So today's class, it was like first session of the season, and people were just jumping right into it, and it felt great because without too much instruction, people are like getting it because it's about being a community, and you're able to like feel free or whatever. And it's really interesting and important that we're able to connect to like where we are in the Bronx, and like how we have these spaces in the Bronx where people are doing and not only preserving, maintaining, but growing our culture, and it's super important. Yeah. You want to say something, Terry?
Today was only my second event, like revolving around Bomba. So of course I didn't dance because I'm really shy, but we gotta work on that.
We'll work on it.
We'll work on it. Because in my head I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this, but then I'm like, when I step in front of the drums, it's gonna be a nightmare. But we don't gotta talk about that. But I hope that I do get to go to more events because I want to reach the point where I can dance in front of the drums because it's really fun.
Yeah, no doubt. So basically, like the kind of questions that I'm just asking people, mainly revolve around culture, the importance of culture, and why keep it alive. Like we could all be at home chilling, watching Netflix. Season 5 of Peaky Blinders just came out today, by the way. So we could all be chilling, but like we chose to spend our time participating in tradition, participating in culture. And the thing that I was talking to them about when we was off camera was you guys deal with anthropology. You dealing with a PhD. I'll let you talk more about that. Anthropology, you was dabbling in it as well. And anthropology is a study of culture, worldwide culture. So like, how does what we witnessed here and what is going on with Bomba, how is that connected to like anthropology and your guys' field of study? And then like, what are your thoughts on just keeping culture alive? Why do it? Why?
Well, I think the thing about anthropology that people don't understand is that anthropology is a tool that people have used for colonization, right? And so it was less about understanding culture because it was important, but more about understanding how to overpower people. But how we're using it now and how we're able to reimagine what anthropology is like me as an anthropologist in training. I'm able to come to spaces like Bomba, and see, wait a minute, this is a technology, this is a very important cultural tool that when you think about it, you're like, wait, this is something that was created by folks who were living in an oppressed community, slavery, right, in Puerto Rico, and they were able to come up with a practice that got them to feel freedom and to feel release and to feel healing. And I think as an anthropologist, I'm interested in thinking about what that means to, even though you're going through various forms of oppression, whether it be racism, whether it be classism, whether it be, I don't know, like disparities in like health services, whatever, because this is the Bronx, but we're still able to use our technology, right? And for me, it's like how we're using the tools, right? How it gets us to be politically involved, and how it allows us to understand our place in the world as like people who are important. We have culture. That means we're, we are active people, and everyone has most people, all people, when they come together and commune with each other, they come up with tools to survive, and this is one of them. Well, I guess how I would respond is the reason why I got interested in anthropology when I first did was because I'm interested in culture preservation, and I understood anthropology to be a tool for culture preservation. Although I'm not necessarily involved in the anthropology in the academic world as much as I was before, I'm still more interested in culture preservation. And culture preservation, for me, means understanding what traditions were set in place by my ancestors and how we can preserve them, how we can be participating members of those communities and those traditions. And so it's why it's important for me to be at an event that says Bomba, and like that I need to be part of it because I want to preserve it. And then by me being a part of it, I can give that to someone else. I can say, "Hey, Terry, my sister, do you want to come to this Bomba thing? It's part of our people. We should be learning this." And when we learn it, we get to share it to other people in our community, and even people who are not necessarily part of the community for which Bomba come from, like Puerto Ricans. You can say, "Oh well, come and I'll show you what this is about. You can participate, and I'm inviting you in so that it's more accessible to people who are interested in it." Also, maintaining the cultural foundations of it, but cultural preservation and the history. But cultural preservation is also about how things grow, right? So it's not just like things are only the way they were when they were first created. Because if we look at, let's say for example, Bomba is a completely different style from, let's say, even 60 years ago. There's different kinds of movements that we are introduced to now, the different kinds of traditions even within Bomba itself. So cultural preservation doesn't only say this is the way it was supposed to be and this is the only thing that's supposed to look like, and now it's like it's growing. Now it's growing, it's including other styles of dancing. You see Bomba like people introducing other kind of diasporic dancing. You have drum-based dancing all over the Caribbean, and everybody's like finding a way to connect it. And I think that's really cool. And it's really nice for, at least for me, to be in the spaces where I can see that kind of growth. Yeah, I know. For me, it's really interesting because I did an event where we had Garifunas, which is they have a heavy population in the Bronx. Shout
Can you break down who
Garifuna are a group of Afro and indigenous folks from, I guess, who were never enslaved. They like to say that that their ship crashed and they were able to resist enslavement. While their purpose for being in this hemisphere was because they were kidnapped, they were able to resist. And long story short, they wound up on the shores of what is now Central America, and they built communities and developed their culture and language and religion and spirituality and survival practices on the coasts of Guatemala, Honduras, some places in Belize, even in El Salvador you see some. But now, due to migration and immigration, a lot of Garifunas are in New York. So I did an event with some Garifunas, and we were noticing that Punta is just like Bomba. Bomba has a lot of elements that you can trace and find surviving in certain places in West Africa. And so we were like, wait a minute, when we connect the dots and we see our culture, we'll understand how resistant and resilient we are and how creative we can be in that preservation work, where it's about not keeping it hermetically sealed, right? Not keeping it like it's not in a time bubble. It exists through times and changes through time, but when you really do the connecting, you're able to see how they're very similar, and to see how it's used it's amazing. But what do you think about like Bomba?
So I don't really know a lot, but I feel like it's really, really cool to be like exploring things that were done before we were here. And the fact that I'm only 15 and I'm learning about this, it means that I could eventually do this. I could eventually be leading things in the future because I'm being exposed to it now. And who knows if all this is even going to be around in the future. But I feel like in the now, it's really cool to like understand what went on before we were here, and to understand like what's happening now, everything that's new now, wasn't here before. And the things that were there before are still here now. It's really, really cool.
What they say, that if you don't know your past, you don't know where you're going. You know what I mean? So that's what we're talking about. I want to go back to something that you had mentioned, something that made me interested because I've heard this before. You mentioned technology. You mentioned the word technology, and people think 11 Pro Max.
Right.
You know what I mean? You see this, and people might think they're just drumming, dancing, and singing. How is this, what we're doing here, how is this technology?
Sure.
What does that even mean? You understand?
I think it's like, what is your definition of technology, right? For me, technology is like how you craft tools to get you to do a certain task, right? Computer is a tool that allows you to communicate. Like the internet is a tool to allow you to communicate and spread things to people who are miles away from you, right? The drums are tools to help you connect with your community. And I'm a very spiritual person. It helps me connect with spirit and ancestors. And drums, when we think about how it's used in traditional and religious spaces, it's a tool to communicate with spirits, with deities. Bomba.
Real quick.
Yeah?
They say, through my study that our ancestors actually achieved altered states of consciousness without anything but the drum. So we talking about, this is not just, music. It's not just, it is music. It's not just music though. This is transcendental almost to an extent,
Yeah. And those things still exist today, right? The people who use the drums, and this is a practice that's, African based, but you see it in Asia, you see it in Europe, you see it in the Americas, indigenous communities in the Americas using drums to help them communicate and reach this transcendental state, as you said. Again, it's a tool, it's a technology that allows us to one step outside of ourselves, because the drum is a sacred object, right? Because they are.
Can you say that again?
A drum is a sacred object.
Can you say it just like one more time and look dead into the camera?
The drum is a sacred object. It comes from nature. You use animal skins, you use wood. Certain places, people had to get creative in how they created their drums, because the bomba, the barril, wasn't like a. It was a tool that they saw, and they were like, wait a minute, these barrels of rum, we could turn that and reuse that. That was once a tree or some trees. And while we're enslaved, then we have to work in these sugarcane fields, and we're gonna use that. Because while it's oppressing us, it's not going to only oppress us, it's going to help us talk to our ancestors and really be in community with each other. So yeah, the drum is a very sacred object, but also the maraca is a sacred object, right? Our dance moves are sacred because we are embodying that kind of, we're using ourselves as also part of the tool, right? Bomba's a tool, our body's a tool, we're instrumental to the way it works. But that's just me like getting like really anthropological and like really spiritual about it, but it's real, right? Because what it is we're able to look at the drum as an object that comes from nature, that requires real training on how to use it effectively, and when you use it effectively, you can do amazing things with it, like get a group of people who are experiencing the worst forms of anti-black slavery this world has ever seen, anti-black racism that this world has ever seen, and slavery, and like really say, wait a minute, let's stop time, let's stop the world, and dance and feel what freedom feels like. It's amazing. It's amazing.
He said you could stop time with the drum. Stop time.
Period.
So we talking about the drum and all of the importance of it all. I guess I would just wrap this up with something that you said. We talking about the worst anti-black sentiment or just indigenous sentiment that the world has ever known and seen. A lot of what I observe in our generation, I say our because we're basically the same age, late 20s and younger. Specifically late 20s and younger, I see so much cynicism. so much like, that's not real. There's just like a major disconnect from the magic of this to, you know, all the distractions of the world and daily life, you know what I mean? So if all three of you, especially you speaking on the generation directly after us, like you're only 15, like, and you're conscious. Like I work with middle school students who are 12, 13, 14 years old, and you know, if you're conscious, they're totally disconnected. You know what I mean? So like, if y'all can have, you know, any advice, words of wisdom for our own generation, late 20s and younger, and then if you could speak to the teens, the 15s, the 16s, the 14s, the 13s, and let them know the importance of all of this and why should they care? I guess that's my real question. Why should they even care? Why should our generation care? Why should your generation care about what's happening here in these spaces?
That's a really loaded question, but I guess it's important for us as a people with historical connections to oppression, and being victims of oppressions and survivors of oppression. It is important for us to understand what happened to us, how we got here in the first place, right? Who we were before we got here, and also what we did to survive. So things like Bomba, it's one of those things that we did to survive. And it's important to be able to understand that we are children of survivors, and we are trying to make sure that our children are also survivors, right? So in order to do that, we have to make sure that the world continues to become a better space, right? So if we ignore the fact that racism, sexism, oppression, homophobia, all of those negative oppressive power structures that are existing, if we ignore that they exist, or if we say, oh, well, it's not as bad as it used to be, we allow for them to continue to creep into our everyday mindsets, right? So oppression is not just only the way laws are set, right? It's also the way people think in their everyday lives. So if someone says, oh, my body shouldn't look this way because it's more appealing if it were lighter or something of that nature, that is racism, right? That's what racism does. And some people say, oh no, but that's just preferential, whatever, but that comes from somewhere. Like it comes from people believing that whiter skin, lighter skin, or whatever. We can talk about colorism all day, but the point is there's a reason for why we believe a lot of the things that we believe, and if we don't challenge the source of that, racism, patriarchy, all those classism, all of that. If we don't challenge those, we will continue to be victims of those and replicate it, right? Because even we can replicate the oppression that oppresses us, right? And it's up to us as people who understand that to inform others so that we can make the changes that need to change, so that our children don't have to be the same victims that our ancestors were. Right. We want to have people to be living in spaces that are better, and that's exactly what they would have wanted. They wouldn't want us to continue to live in environments of oppression. They want us to be free, and so we have to keep working towards that freedom.
Right. And I think a little bit of advice that I would give is to like really question everything you learned in school, everything you learned on TV, everything you learned, because there's a narrative that is going around that kind of places our ancestors as kind of like these passive, like, you know, this is how you get folks like Kanye West to say things like slavery 400 years, that sounds like a choice. No, right? Like people were actively resisting and surviving, but because we don't have those narratives, right? We don't have that foundation understanding that they're created tools to survive, that when folks were living through the harshest of times, they were still living and thriving, or maybe not thriving is the right word, but they were still living and coming up with ways to resist. Then you understand yourself as a powerful person, right? You come from a tradition of people who are, you know what I'm saying? Powerful people.
The reason why that resonated with me is because the other day, literally, I just like, you know, when you know that you come from a powerful people, the way you walk changes. Like, literally, the other day, I was on IG, and I don't know, I caught a spirit or something like that, and I said, you know what, let me Google the word king. Let me just Google the word king. What came up? White European blonde-haired, happy kings, European garb, European crowns. And I'm like, damn, like, so I'm not blaming Google. I'm just saying, like, the most commonly accepted image of a king is somebody that don't even look like the people that are Googling king. And then I Googled African king, and then I Googled caciques and bohiques, and I was like, these are the images. So when you know what you come from, your whole countenance changes. You understand? You perk up a little bit, you know?
Different. Yeah, you walk different. So my advice is really learn who you are, where you came from. That way you can see, one, how you walk different in the moment when you see when you're not being respected, when you're not treated right. Second, learn the history so that you know that for a very long time, and it still happens today, you are given a false narrative, right? And so one of my goals, thing that drives me, is to reshape that narrative, right? I'm an oral historian, I'm an anthropologist in training, and my biggest job is to flip the script. You know what I'm saying? Like, change the narrative so people are like, wait a minute, who was it, Dr. King? He was like, somebody taught us a lie, right? He was like, they said black was a negative thing, right? And basically that's still happening today, right? They're telling us lies, and so our job is, as people who want to create change, is to, one, understand what that lie is and start telling the truth. That's it.
Okay, so being that I am a kid, I feel like I can speak from a child's perspective or a teenager's perspective. So I feel like something about teens are in our day is that we feel like nobody's gonna listen to us, and like when we talk, they don't care because we're younger and we have to respect our elders. And I feel like that really takes a toll on us because we feel like we have no power. But something that I think that is also important is that if you know what you know and you learn and you're teaching kids that are your age what you know, then eventually you can be so strong. And I feel like, going back to what my brothers were saying, that if you know your background and you like learn and you want to learn and you spread what you do know, then eventually you can get a really, really strong message across. And we are the future.
Period.
So I think that it's really important that adults and people that are older than us and our elders understand us, because one day we're gonna be where they are. So us kids, of course, going back, we need to like learn, and we need to like stop thinking that adults are not gonna listen to us, because even the smallest things they don't see from our perspective. So something that we may see in one way, they'll see it in a completely different way. Maybe we'll open their eyes to something new. So I feel like
I gotta say, like, some of the best activists that I know are young people. Some of the best people who have created change are young people, right? And some of the more seasoned activists know that their work only goes so far if they're not listening to young people. So young people are not only the future, they're the present, right? Because they also exist. And this idea that we don't listen to like young people because they don't have anything to say, that's a tool of white supremacy. That's an invention that comes from over there, right? So if we really want to change how we exist and behave in the world, we have to be able to not only, we have to respect our elders, we have to respect everybody, we have to respect our children and the young ones, because they all have something, they're part of our world, our community, and they're existing, right? So they have opinions and they have something to contribute to the world.
Love it.
you took the words right out my mouth.
I heard you, sis.
Yeah. Good? Yep. So, I mean, really nothing else needs to be said. That was an amazing conversation. I thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. Randomly, I ran into them today at this event. Like, just randomly, destiny is real. I live my life by fate. If y'all just want to inform the people on any projects that y'all have going on or any events that they should know about, do you have anything going on that you wanted to speak on right now? Anything, events, your involvement, your work, or anything like that?
So I'm working with Bomba. Hopefully, we're going to be doing some programming where they just released the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College just released their central journal on Bomba. They have a whole journal, so like our academic papers and articles, interviews about Bomba, what it means. Hopefully, I'll be able to do some programming around that. So if you find something, Google Bomba, Puerto Rican Center for Puerto Rican Studies, you might be able to find something, or just read it. It's out there to read. And the Andrew Friedman Home has these free workshops on Bomba with Dr. Drum and Bomba Yo on Saturdays. Make sure you check it out. It's free, open to the public. Just show up with an open heart and open mind.
I just want to say that there's a lot of great things going out in our community for our people, but they don't really work unless people are participating. So find those things. Go to the events that you see the flyers on the subway, or you see it. You're just walking outside, or you're on IG, on Facebook, or whatever, and you see, oh, this is happening. You're like, oh, maybe I should go to that. Go to it. You should go.
And just to build off that real quick, like, I think a lot of the reason why, in my conversations from before, a lot of the reason why people don't come to these things is fear. They fear of doing something new. They fear being judged by other people. And I'm just like, yo, like, and I empathize with it. I danced today. I haven't danced in 22 years. Today was the first time I danced in 22 years. And it was liberating. It was amazing. So if fear is what's holding you back, if that fear of judgment, or if that fear of, I'm not Puerto Rican enough, I'm not Latino enough, don't worry about it. Like, I'm talking firsthand. Don't worry about it. It's a warm space. It's inviting, and these things only work with people participation. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all, man. Cool.